Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. To all hotel travelers of Reddit, what's your creepiest experience? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts. And subscribe. My mom was traveling for work and sat next to a man, fellow business traveler, on the plane. They had a casual conversation and exchanged business cards. Later that evening, she's in her hotel watching TV and gets a phone call from the front desk that her husband is here and they want to know if they can give him a key to the room. Turns out the creep on the plane was pretending to be her husband to try to get into her room. I was traveling out of the country right after finishing up a huge 5-day work event where I had about 10 hours of sleep total during the 5 days. I got to the motel, which is kinda run down, and the carpet and blankets are damp, but I'm so exhausted I don't even really think about it. I fall asleep pretty much immediately, at like 8 p.m. local time. At maybe 11 p.m. or so, I get a call from the motel phone saying there's been a complaint about noise. I tell them that's impossible, I've been sleeping. They ask me if maybe someone else is in the room, and I tell them, nope, I'm here alone, so there's definitely no one else making noise. They ask me again if I'm sure I'm by myself and not causing any noise. I say yes again, fall back asleep immediately. When I woke up and thought about it some more, I realized how weird the entire interaction was. There was absolutely no noise I could hear anywhere nearby, and I don't know why the motel staff would need to clarify so many times that I was alone. Apparently, they never called, so I assume it must have been someone calling the different rooms to see who was in the room and how many people. I've been so glad to always use the extra latch chain lock. My company would put us up in the Shiloh Inn downtown when we were in Salt Lake City. A coworker of mine was awakened in the middle of the night by the sounds of a bunch of kids in the hallway. It went on for longer than he could tolerate, so he opened the room door to tell them to hush, only to find the hallway empty. He could still hear the children, so, figuring they were in an adjoining room, he called down to the front desk to complain. The man at the front desk claimed to be certain there were no kids staying on that floor, but that he was certain the noise would subside in a bit. He offered to send up some earplugs. My coworker was a bit annoyed. How can you say there are no kids here when I'm hearing kids? But went back to bed and eventually fell asleep. The next day, when he was checking out, a different clerk made the mistake of asking the routine question, "Was everything satisfactory with your stay?" My coworker gave her an earful about the noisy kids and how the other clerk had dismissed his complaints. The clerk looked a little uncomfortable and said in a half-whisper, "We're not supposed to talk about our history with guests, but please do a Google search for Rachel David, and you'll understand what happened to you. We get similar complaints every few weeks, and we try to never put kids on that floor." In the van on the way to the airport, he read on his phone the story of how a mother, Rachel David, had tossed her 7 children off the 11th floor balcony of the hotel, then called the International Dunes to their deaths before jumping herself. A year ago, I was in rural Arkansas, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. I usually sleep with all lights off and even pull out the wires of the alarm clock to avoid the light. Woke up in the middle of the night and realized that the bathroom light was on. The tap was running in the shower too. I knew I couldn't have forgotten that. Still, I thought that I might have, as I was tired and sleepy. Turned them off, turned off the light, and went back to bed. Woke up a couple of hours and saw that the lights are on in the bathroom. Tap is running and so was the shower. The tub had clogged, water had started seeping out. Scared shitless, I left the room and walked down to the front desk. A half-asleep, middle-aged lady was the manager, and her dog was asleep. Both of them came back with me. I explained to her the whole thing and showed her the tub. She was flabbergasted. The dog was still not in the room and was roaming outside. He came into the room and without any trigger started barking wildly in the bathroom. The lights went out in the bathroom while the rest of the room was still powered. Both of us sprinted out of the room, but the dog kept barking in the bathroom while she kept shouting, "Charlie, Charlie." After 20 seconds of this, both of us decided to go back in for the dog. At this stage, I was almost shitting my pants. Charlie came running out of the bathroom and went to the corner of the room, sat there drenched in water, sweat, and whimpered. After what seemed like an eternity, the dog walked with us, went back to the front desk, and sat there for the remainder of the night. Alright guys, just a quick check-in. New York got obliterated yesterday with a snowstorm, so throughout the day, night, and even early this morning, I've been out, getting the driveway ready, gotta move the cars back and work the front side now, and try to get my 12-year-old and 11-year-old to actually do something. But anyway, we had a fire going outside yesterday for just about the whole day. My wife made Tennessee pot roast, which is great. If you don't know what it is, you can look it up. It's the first time I think I ever had it. I've had pot roast hundreds of times, but mostly Yankee pot roast. Tennessee was good. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. And if you're in the Northeast or, got hit with that snow, I hope everyone's safe and doing well. And, see you guys tomorrow. Take care. About 14 years ago, I set off on a 13-month round-the-world trip. One of my first stops was Kilkenny, Ireland. I caught a bus from town and arrived at Folksrath Castle, built in the late 1300s. In 2004, it was a hostel that cost only €14 per night for a bed. I had never spent the night in a castle before, much less for €14. I set my things on a bed and went outside to socialize with other tourists in the late afternoon. There were a couple of guys on the roof, and they yelled out for us to join them for the sunset. I love sunsets, so I started up the stone steps. First a circular staircase, and then a very narrow last flight of stairs to the roof. While I was climbing, I heard someone behind me, but when I got to the top of the stairs and turned around, there was no one behind me. I found this odd, but enjoyed the sunset anyway. At dinner time, the guests all cook in the kitchen and then dine by candlelight. The castle caretaker then told us a story that the castle was haunted. One ghost makes the air feel cold, another female ghost smells like flowers, and the last ghost runs up and down the stairs. The hair on my arms stood on end. Was I followed by a ghost? I didn't sleep much that night in the creaky old bunk bed. Unfortunately, a few years later, the caretaker resigned, and Folksrath Castle closed its doors to backpackers in 2009. It's privately owned today. I was in Madagascar for a study abroad, and a stomach illness was eating its way through the group. It would seemingly bounce from person to person, so somebody would be sick every day 2 days. We were traveling to our 4th hotel when it was my turn to be sick. The group dropped me off and got me settled in my room before they continued their day of activities. The hotel was pulled up to was straight out of that Kenan and Kel Halloween special. Suits of armor in the foyer, poorly lit, and a very creepy old owner who looked like he died years ago. We were the only people staying at the hotel, so it was also eerily quiet. There was also a cat that lived in the hotel and was howling for what felt like hours. The stairs to our rooms were magnificently large and ornate, and the hallways were pitch black. They were motion activated, but on a large delay. So you'd walk into the hallway and they'd flicker after you already walked past them. I got to my room and all I could think about was the sloshing in my stomach. My stomach contents were basically liquefied, as I had fluid shooting out of both ends. I literally crawled into bed and fell asleep for hours. I was awoken halfway through my sleep to the sounds of my doorknob jingling for like 3 minutes before the door very slowly opened. I can see out into the hallway, but it's pitch black. The lights weren't activated. I said, "Hello?" and there was no response. I was in no condition to get up, so I just waited, and after like 20 seconds, the door just slams shut with a loud bang. I very badly had to go to the bathroom again, but I was too afraid to crawl my way back to it. As I finally mustered the courage to relieve myself, I heard the water in the sink begin to run, as if somebody in there was washing their hands. That's when I realized the door was open to the bathroom. I closed it because it smelled of vom shits. I could feel the hairs on my arms stand, and I wasn't sure what to do. I threw the covers over my head and just tried to go back to sleep. I woke up again after a couple more hours, and my group returned to the hotel maybe an hour before I woke up. I walked down to dinner, and everybody was sitting around this dusty, large table staring at me like I was a ghost. They asked me if I was the one opening and closing their doors, or if I was the one knocking on doors and running away before they opened them. One girl said she heard a voice whispering through her window, but were caught up maybe 2 or 3 floors. During the night, I was knocked out cold and didn't experience anything else, but everybody in my group had to deal with constant door harassment, and more of them heard whispers. The cat also began to howl at about 11 p.m. and didn't stop until 1 a.m. Early 2000s. I just turned 18 and did some work abroad. I was in Czech Republic and did some shifts in this tiny remote mountaintop hotel. They also let me stay there as long as I worked. At night, I could hear wolves howling. There was this maitre d', older gentleman, tanned, pencil mustache, and super formal behavior. We never exchanged words before this. One night after my shift, I was sitting at the restaurant alone when he approached me and asked if I wanted to go for a walk, at night, in the woods. Why? Outside the patio, there wasn't any source of light before the town below the mountain. Not even on the road leading down. It was absolute darkness, and this guy wanted to take me to the woods for some reason. No thanks. I politely declined, but he was persistent. I asked why should we go to the woods, and he said, why not, it's fun. No, it's not, it's dangerous. He claimed he knew the area well, and started to get weirdly desperate about it. After multiple no's, he left. I felt so weirded out about it, I just went in my room and called it a night. Also, an odd side note that I never saw him again. So not super creepy story, but creepiest I have encountered so far. Also, I want to add that most likely the guy was just lonely and not a murderer. It was a very remote location with very few customers or new faces. On that trip, I got the chance to visit Staropraмен's brewery, and it was the best thing ever. Stayed at a Motel 6 in Marina, California. I wasn't expecting a 5-star accommodation because, hey, it's a Motel 6, right? Other than being a little noisy, we slept okay. The next morning, I started packing my stuff. I'm a lung cancer survivor and need special equipment, CPAP, to help me breathe at night. I unplugged my unit and went to disassemble it to be packed away. When I opened it up, it was chock full of roaches. Instead of breathing clean, filtered air, I'd been breathing air filtered through roach leg hair. They were even in the tubing and mask. I cannot even begin to describe the horror of lifting that lid and seeing those little bastards scurry out of and deep into the inner workings of my equipment. Of course, they were in our bed sheets too, and our luggage. We emptied every single article from our luggage, killed the roaches that were hiding in the liner, then carefully shook everything out and repacked. The CPAP unit was bagged tightly because I knew there were roaches inside and didn't want to bring them home. I complained to the manager, who assured me there were no roaches in that room. She was simultaneously sympathetic and unhelpful as hell. After 3 months of back and forth with Motel 6 corporate office in Texas, I was refunded for the 2 nights I had stayed there, which is doubly horrifying when I realized that I'd been sucking on roach fumes for not 1 but 2 nights. It gets worse though. My medical equipment was ruined. Phone calls to various repair shops around the country got the same results. We can't fix it, we won't fix it, we don't even want it in the building for fear that our inventory will be infested. Insurance wouldn't pay to replace it because, hey, they bought the first one, so tough shit, right? As a result, I was out of pocket several $100s to replace vital equipment that keeps me alive at night because Motel 6 can't keep their premises clean. It wound up costing me nearly $900 for a 2-night stay in a crappy roach motel. For that kind of money, I could have stayed at the Cypress Hotel in Carmel and had money left over for dinner. Family vacation, 1 a.m. My brother and I had just finished watching The Shining on TV. Neither of us had seen it before. We heard someone trying to open our door. No one else was supposed to have the keys, Someone tried to swing open the door, but the hotel lock stopped them. They kept trying to open it multiple times, banging on the door against the lock. After a few tries, they gave up. The hotel desk clerk accidentally entered the wrong room for their keycards. It was probably the best way I saw The Shining. I can't be scared more than that from that movie. When I was 12, I was staying in a motel with my mom on a road trip. We were in the middle of nowhere in Texas at a motel that had decent ratings in our guidebook and was really cheap, so we went for it. In the middle of the night, the owner knocked on the door and told us we had to leave because he wanted the room for someone else. What? My mom was outside arguing with him while I was gathering our things, and I was terrified because I heard him start yelling. I looked out the window and saw about half a dozen bikers in vests appear out of nowhere, maybe a nearby room, and start confronting the owner. My mom came inside quickly, and we watched them start harassing the guy. Things like, "She paid to be here. You're gonna let her stay tonight. We don't want to ever hear shit like this from you again." And the owner was saying things like, "I don't want any trouble." Everybody left fairly quickly, and we didn't ever hear anything about it the next day at checkout. We weren't able to sleep very well because we were so shook up, but it was better than getting in the car again. Thank you, anonymous biker gang. Finally, something I can answer. I traveled to Liverpool a few years ago with an ex-girlfriend. We stayed at the Adelphi Hotel for 2 nights. I found it on a booking website for cheap, and I'm a massive history geek, so I thought it would be perfect for those unfamiliar with the building. It had been in continuous use from the 19th century. It has these really old-fashioned rooms with high ceilings and generally Victorian furnishings. I thought it was great if our room was a bit creepy. There's a massive mirror right across from the bed, just so there was nothing out of the ordinary, so we went out to explore the town. When we came back at night, we were too tired to even take a shower as we normally do. We fell right into bed. Something to be conscious of before I begin about the actual creepy part is that the room was an ensuite with a tiny foyer in between the bedroom and bathroom, where the front door to the hotel room was located along with a storage closet. I always like to lock things before I go to sleep. It's kind of a habit of mine. So I locked both the front door as well as the chain lock on the door leading to the bedroom. So far, everything was normal, and we drifted off to sleep, or so I thought. Less than 15 minutes after I closed my eyes, but not yet fallen asleep, I experienced the most intense terror of my life. I'm not talking normal terror. This was the most afraid I've ever been in my life. Like, I was consciously aware that someone was watching me and didn't want me to know. There was a feeling of dread in the air, like something wasn't right. I jumped out of bed and turned the light on. Nothing. But the door was wide open. I woke up my ex and asked her if she had gotten up to use the toilet since we had gone to bed. She said no, so I asked her again with more intensity. No, she was certain that neither of us had gotten up in the 15 minutes since we turned off the lights. I told her, okay, and asked her if she felt weird at all. She said no, just very tired and she wanted to sleep. However, I was too terrified to fall asleep. So I turned on all the lights in the room and looked the door again, trying everything to make my mind off what was seemingly just an empty room. Every now and then, glancing nervously up from my laptop to see if everything was still there. Hours later, I was too tired to stay up anymore, and I fell asleep without realizing, but when I woke up in the morning, the door was once again open. Once again, my ex denied either of us using the toilet in the night. The same sequence of events was repeated the next night as well. After the first night, I began to suspect something was not normal. However, I refrained from Googling Adelphi Hotel and haunted until I was on a train out of the city. Apparently, the Adelphi is the most haunted hotel in Britain. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I was really frightened that night. I will never forget it. Even now, I'm sat at home in my well-lit flat in the middle of the day, and I'm getting scared writing this. Spent the night at a travel lodge 2 years ago in Amarillo, an overnight stop toward my goal of camping in the Ozarks. Everything seemed fine at the front desk. The place was maybe a little old, but not that bad. I went to my room with my campaign gear, and several people were talking to each other on various balconies and parts of the courtyard. I was paying for a cheap motel, so it didn't bother me much, as I know tramps and hookers where I see them, and as long as you're a polite person, generally people will be polite back. I was, however, a woman traveling alone in a brand new rental car. I locked my door and went about getting comfortable for the night. I found ashes and stains on the sheets of the bed. I sighed, but was prepared with my own bedding, so I got it out and turned on the TV. Just then, my door handle shook. I walked over and looked out the peephole to see a tattooed dude was trying the handle. I asked if the door, "Can I help you?" and he ran off instantly, a bit upset. I called the front desk and they sighed and told me they'd take care of it. I heard some yelling that everything went quiet. Normally I would have listened to my gut and just drove off to the nearest tent site, but I'm a penny pincher and got stubborn about it too. But everything I had in the room barricaded the door. I slept in my sleeping bag against the wall with my billy club flashlight that does strobe lights in one hand and a knife in the other, because politeness only goes so far. Well, 3 a.m. rolled around and dude unlocked the door with a key. I screamed like Xena and turned my strobe on. After he tripped in, he tripped right back out. Being crazy and intimidating can work, but don't stay at a travel lodge in Amarillo if you're a single female. I travel a lot and have gone to plenty of third world countries, etc., but my worst hotel stay by far was in Sullivan County, New York, less than 2 months ago. We got hit with 2 storms that decimated that area and knocked out power for 10 days. I was there doing emergency work, and the entire area was a shit show. So they put me up in a hotel. I'm like, sure, whatever. Don't really check it out because our logistics person takes care of it and I'm swamped doing 18-hour days. So I arrive at this hotel around 1 a.m. exhausted, and I show up and it's locked. There's a handwritten note in crayon on the door that says, "Not here, call." I notice at this time that the hotel is legitimately crawling with meth and or crackheads. Not just weird people, but people screaming, running through the halls, slamming doors, crying, etc. Finally, the guy comes and lets me in. The place smells like a sour mix of shit, death, and mothballs. I really don't have a need for the finer things in life, but this was a little much. So I get to my room and have to walk through this dingy, filthy hall. It was a motel, so my room was exposed to the outside with a little walkway. I show up and immediately see a huge brownish stain on the floor that I can only guess was old blood. The lampshade was riddled with cigarette burns, and the room itself was filthy. Someone obliterated the bathroom in what I could only assume was a methed-out Jackson Pollock shit imitation. I was so tired, and had to be back at work in like 4 hours, that I just stayed and passed out in my clothes with my boots still on. The fucking door didn't close though, so the wind was whipping on me through a large crack, and the heat didn't work. I wrapped myself up in the duvet like a human taco to no avail. About an hour in, people started scampering around outside, screaming and yelling. I got up and jammed a chair under the door handle because, of course, the door didn't lock. I seriously considered sleeping in my car, but it was cold and I felt like I had a better chance being murdered in a parking lot than a room. Some crackhead crashed into my little bay window thing shortly after, and I sat straight up, grabbed my Leatherman, and prepared myself for having to kill someone that night. When I got back to my station in the morning and told the guys where I stayed, they didn't even believe me. 2 of the cops there said they investigated homicides there, not together, 2 different ones. The Red Cross rep said they used to send the homeless population there, but now they don't because it's too dangerous. It's a big running joke now, but at the time it fucking sucked, and it was the only time in my life I was genuinely worried about where I slept. Oh, I have one. Though this has turned out quite long to describe. So mine takes place in London hostel a few weeks ago. I have 2 friends with me that are both male and we're staying in a 9-bed mixed dorm. There's 3 sets of 3-tiered bunk beds. I'm in the bottom bed of the right bunk, friend 1 on the top of my bunk, and friend 2 in the bottom bed of the middle bunk. So, we get in at like 2 a.m. and are just quietly getting in our beds. After a few minutes of lying there, trying to sleep, I hear rustling behind me. I'm lying on my side facing the wall, so I think it's just someone going through their bag and ignore it. Then I feel a hand on my hip over the cover. I turn around and it's a random guy telling me to move over and trying to pull at my cover. I initially thought he was drunk and wasn't sure which bed to be in, so I tell him to go find his own bed. And then he shuffles away to the bottom bed or left bunk. Then he comes back again. I again tell him to go back to his own bed, and he shuffles back to his own again. This happens another couple times, with me gradually speaking louder and getting less polite, telling him to f*** off. So I'm shaking, because the situation is making me nervous, and message my mate that's on the top bunk, saying I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep that night. He messages back casually, thinking it's because of someone snoring. This is when I find out both my mates have earplugs in, and although they heard me speaking, they each thought I was speaking to the other friend. So I tell him the situation, and he starts keeping an eye out. I hear the guy go to the bathroom that is en suite, but I can tell from the light he left the bathroom door open whilst doing so and refused to look. My mate fills me in that the guy was walking around with his pants down and deliberately left the door open to get me to look. But either way, the guy goes back to his bed after, and we think the situation is finally over. Then it happens again. My mate, keeping an eye out, shines his phone light on the floor and shouts for the guy to f*** off. Apparently he was crawling across the floor again toward me. The guy suddenly takes offense at my mate's light shining on him and starts actually climbing the bunk ladder like King Kong to get to my mate on the top and trying to take his phone. They wrestle for a while my mate actually kicking the guy in the neck to try to keep him away, only for the guy to swing backwards and come straight back at him again. I use this time to run for security, who find the guy still hanging on the bed when they got there, then call the police and have the guy taken away in a riot van and banned from the building. Whilst the police had dragged him outside, waiting for the riot van, the guy even headbutted the brick wall several times. No idea what the guy was on, because it wasn't alcohol, but definitely on something to take a kick to the neck and still act like nothing happened afterwards. The guy kept trying to blame my mate when security came as well, saying things in broken English like, "Come up here and see how violent this guy is." My other mate, that had slept through the whole incident, kept saying the next day that he couldn't believe how friendly everyone in London is.